Hey everybody, welcome to a very special episode of Voice for Valor. I'm your host Mike, and today's conversation is deeply personal to me. After 20 years, I finally reconnected with one of my closest friends from my military days. We served together in missile training, and sitting down to record this episode felt like picking up exactly where we left off all those years ago. The moment we saw each other, the decades just melted away. We jumped right into stories about our training days, the challenges we faced together, those late nights cramming for tests, and all the unforgettable characters we served alongside. It really brought home how military bonds are different from anything else in life. What makes this conversation particularly meaningful is that my friend recently received the diagnosis of terminal stage 4 mesothelioma. Hearing him talk about facing this news head on, making the most of his time with his family, and finding purpose even now, it's both heartbreaking and incredibly inspiring to me as his old brother in arms. Throughout our conversation, we keep coming back to the lessons that stuck with us from our service. The importance of genuinely caring for people under your command, and why we need to trust young leaders to step up, and how our military experience shaped both of us for life. This episode isn't always an easy listen, but it's one that means the world to me. It's about friendship. It's about standing the test of time, facing impossible odds with courage, and finding meaning in both the good and difficult parts of life. Whether you served or not, I think you'll find something valuable in listening to two old friends sharing our wisdom, our memories, and our unbreakable bond. So you know the rules. Grab a coffee, maybe even a tissue or two, and join us for this conversation about brotherhood, resilience, and making every moment count.
Dude, when was the last time we seen each other?
Oh, dude, seen each other? It's been quite a while. The last time we talked was when I was back in New Mexico. I think we caught up about maybe a year or two ago, but last time we've seen each other, it's been a while.
Has it been since pilot training?
Yeah, when you were Del Rio.
Wow.
Yeah, I was on my way to
That was over 20 years ago.
Yeah, no kidding, dude. You still look the same.
So do you, just a little less hair.
No hair. Couldn't help that. I had to get rid of it.
I tell you what, so I tell people all the time about the military, and I think it wasn't General Walters, well, now General Walters. It was his vice wing commander. His name escapes me all the time. I see him all the time. I see his picture at the Pentagon gym all the time. And he used to say that he had traveled all over the country and he always had somewhere to stay because of military relationships.
Yeah.
And so here it is, been 20 years, and it's like we can just flip a switch and we're just back together as friends.
Dude, I remember back in the day in Cheyenne when you would do your private pilot's license and your training in Cessna in the Cheyenne airport. I remember that, man. I was like, holy crap, you're flying in this dinky 52.
Do you remember? Of course you remember, but for the listeners out there, it was you, me, and I can't remember if it was Justin or another person, and we all went flying together.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I took us to that airport that was higher elevation than I'd ran the weight and balance calculations for. So I was pulling on the yoke and the airplane was not taking off. I'm like, guys, lean forward. So I can't remember. You were laughing so hard. You're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. We had our trust in our pilot. It's good.
So I have flown to that same airport in the C-17.
Wow.
Yeah. 20 years later, I have a video of flying a low level through the Colorado Rockies, and we did some touch and goes at that airfield before we went off to do the low level, and I kept thinking, this looks so familiar. Oh yeah, I was here in a Cessna 20 years ago.
Right. Now here you are in a 172. Jesus.
Yeah, and now, you know, flying around at 300, 400 knots everywhere you go, to think back that you're going 80 knots in that little bug smasher.
Yeah.
In the mountains of Wyoming. And one of my friends, you know, Matt Gunther, Matt would be like, yeah, I fly IFR, you know, instrument flight rules. He's like, no, I fly IFR. I follow roads. I just find the freeway. I look for 14,000 foot mountains, and I'm like, yeah, those mountains are to the west, and here's the freeway, and here we go.
That's a good test of his navigational skills, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Hey man, congrats on your upcoming retirement, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you. February 14th and February 28th, I get my DD 214 check of the month club. How many years did you have? 23?
I got 22 years. Make sure you get your retired ID.
What drove you to retirement? What was it about? Why at 22 years?
It was a hard decision. I don't know if I told you, but I practically 7-day outed on an assignment. And I was board selected to be the vice wing commander at Cheyenne. And, you know, leading up to that last assignment, you know, it was always the colonel's group saying, oh yeah, we'll get you back to Omaha. We'll get you back to the kids. And that's essentially what it was, is me getting back to the kids. Because at that point, you know, when I got selected, I was 2 years already living away from the boys. And it was just, you know, granted, phones these days make it a little bit easier, but it's just not the same. Missing those day-to-day activities, those milestones, just seeing them on the weekends. You know, I wanted to get back to the kids, and the Air Force taunting that carrot in front of me, like, yeah, we'll get you back there. And then for some reason, you know, I opted out, and for some reason my records were still scored, and I got selected to go to Vice Wing Command. And I was like, no, I can't do it. That's another two more years of my time away from the kids. And I said, I'm not going to do it. You know, it took me about 5 days to make a decision, to think it over, talk to the family, talk to the kids. You know, I was like, you know, I'm going to go ahead and turn this down, and I'm going to go ahead and 7-day out. And I did that. And as you know, 7-day with a 7-day out option automatically starts the clock for a 120-day automatic retirement. So I did that, and I don't regret the decision, because it was nice to come back and to co-locate and cohabitate with my kids and having them here. Definitely something that I missed, and strictly the reason why I decided to do that. Even though I would have wanted to stay in as much as I can with the Air Force, I just couldn't swallow being away from them for that time. So I decided to retire, to hang it up, and open a different chapter in my life and career. But as you know, things unfolded not the way I wanted. So I retired back in December of 2023. I didn't have any terminal. I had leave, but I didn't have enough time to do terminal leave, because with a 7-day out option, it just takes a lot of paperwork and approval. So by the time I got my retirement approved, I had essentially 45 days left of my 120 days clock. So I couldn't take any terminal leave, because I had to out process, get all my retirement stuff situated. So my last official day was December. I worked up until December 31st, 2023. Granted, there was the Christmas holidays there. And then January 8th, I put on the civilian uniform and started working for a defense contractor. And that sparked the beginning of my transition from military to the civilian workforce. But again, it was nice to be co-located and to live with the kids, because between the retiring and starting working with Leidos, I transitioned back to Omaha. So it was nice to be back in Omaha to be with the kids, for sure. So the main reason why I retired is so I can be back with the kids.
Prior to your diagnosis, and we'll dig a little bit further into that, prior to your diagnosis, how was your transition from the military to the defense contract world
taking off that uniform and being a Mister rather than a Colonel?
It was hard because I really didn't have any downtime from wearing the military uniform to wearing the civilian uniform. And I think that's just the virtue of how my retirement unfolded. Like I said, I really didn't get an opportunity to take terminal leave, so I sold back my vacation time, my leave time. So I didn't really have any downtime, and I went straight to work. The transition was a little bit eye-opening to me, working in the civilian workforce, especially in the defense contracting. You deal with a whole different set of dynamics and a whole different set of demographics, both experience and age-wise. Here I am coming in as a 47-year-old working amongst college graduates who are all technically smart, in the technical aspect of things. And being a 22-year career guy in the military, at that point in your career, you're more of the management, the leadership, the manipulation of the organization as opposed to the technical aspect. So I was kind of taken back by the people I was working with and how young they were. And, it was very eye-opening and very humbling. I came in and knowing that I was going to be working for an organization that had a very young workforce, I had to swallow my pill and take me back and say, hey, I'm going to be in the weeds and I'm going to be working with some young guys, and I can expect some grandpa questions from them like, hey, what would you do if you were faced with this situation? So I experienced some of that, and it was nice because I got to, like I said, work with a younger crew of people. It was different because I had to learn more of the technical aspects. But I did transition. So when I initially retired, I started working for Leidos, and Northrop Grumman gave me an opportunity for another position. And so I transitioned from Leidos to Northrop Grumman. And one of the stipulations that I asked Northrop Grumman is before I started, I want a month off. I wanted a month of downtime, and give me that downtime so I could possibly be mentally prepared to work for them. And the whole reason why I did that is because I knew and I recognized that I was missing that downtime between my transition. So I said, hey, Northrop, I'll gladly take the position and thank you for the opportunity. But before I start, I want 30 days before I start because I wanted to have that downtime so I can mentally prepare and like I said, have the downtime. But it was nice in working, like I said, with a young workforce, being more technically involved in the nuances of day-to-day operations. So it was, like I said, very humbling to work with the young guys who are very more technically smart. And it's nice to see because they're very eager, they're smart, but and then unfortunately I only worked with Northrop Grumman for a couple of months, physically worked with them before I had to deal with my medical stuff. So before I got yanked out.
You brought up a couple points that I want to mention. You are the second person that told me take time off when you leave. Take some time off. And so that's part of the reason why I'm doing all this, the podcasting and just getting to know other veterans to these lessons learned that we can share with others. And then the other thing you mentioned, I feel like in the military, the young enlisted, they keep me so young. They keep me grounded. They keep me thinking about all the different dynamics of communication and how we work together. And so were you just kind of a roll up your sleeves kind of guy and really get into the trenches with them? Because you said you came from a senior colonel officer position of, upper level management, and now you're with these young, very technical, skilled, savvy folks.
Yeah, because as you recall, and you did it too, but being a senior leader and being in command positions, you're worried more of you're stretched out pretty thin over a wide umbrella of the operations, and you don't really get the opportunity. At least I didn't get into the weeds of the technicalities of the mission, because as you take care of the people, the mission gets taken care of, right? You let them take care of the missions, you clear the hurdles for them, you clear the bureaucracy and provide them the top cover. And that's how you operate. And that's how I operated for so many years, that I really didn't get to the little nuances of how the day-to-day operations were. Until I got into the civilian workforce, where I was part of that workforce now at that point. Granted, I probably could have gotten a job that was equivalent to the supervisory role, but I really didn't want to have and to deal with that kind of mindset, because I think I was kind of mentally exhausted from having to do all of that stuff. And then just to get just the overall taking care of the organization can take its toll on an individual, as you probably know. It's tiresome, and I just didn't want to deal with that piece when it came to my civilian chapter. I knew at some point I would probably climb the ladder. I didn't want to start at the very bottom, but I didn't want to start pretty high either. I wanted to take a break from the mental, I wouldn't say strain, but just the mental stresses that we encounter being in such supervisory roles of taking care of an organization or leading an organization. It takes a toll on an individual, and I felt that coming, and I just needed to accept or do something that, one, kept me busy, two, that kind of financially helps support my habits of habitual spending. Find a position that kind of helped me there, and three is just like I said, keep me busy, but not overly busy, because I recognize at my age that I really needed to slow down and throttle back a little bit on how I was operating leading up to my retirement. So yeah, it was a balance in trying to find the right position for me, so that I knew, and I think I found it. Unfortunately, like I said, my medical condition kind of took me away from it, but I did find the fine balance of finding a position that was not as stressful, not as supervisory engaging, but also not into the weeds of the technicalities. But again, unfortunately, my medical condition kind of took me away from that.
How long after your official retirement did you get your diagnosis? And please share your diagnosis. I don't want to mispronounce the terms. I don't want to get your story wrong. How long after you retired did you start to feel these symptoms and this diagnosis, if you could share with us?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy to share everything. And the reason why I went public with my condition is because I want to share as much information and try to prevent somebody from going down the path that I went down. So like I said, I retired back in December 2023. Immediately started working in the civilian workforce in January 2024. And then at the end of May, I just started suffering from symptoms of not being able to breathe, feeling full all the time, and I thought it was a function of my diet, in which I was, because I'm lactose intolerant. And please, if I'm disclosing too much, I'm sure you'll edit this at somehow.
No, I love this. We keep it raw and real.
But as you know, I try to keep myself physically active, and running was a thing for me. It kind of helped me de-stress. So I noticed my running mileage and my cardiovascular was suffering, and I was finding it difficult to run 5 miles. That I throttled back, and it was difficult to run 3 miles, and then it was difficult to run 1 mile. And then just this one day in the end of May, I was like, you know what, I'm going to push myself, and ended up running as fast as I can, running 1 mile. And because of that night, I just couldn't breathe. And it just felt like this heavy weight on my chest. I went to the emergency room, and they determined that I had accumulated fluid in my lung cavity, in my right lung cavity. Did a CT scan and determined that I was accumulating fluid in my abdomen, hence why I was feeling full. Given more tests, it took about a whole month of tests and a biopsy. Mid-July, July 15th is when I was officially diagnosed with terminal stage 4 mesothelioma, metastatic mesothelioma. So I have mesothelioma on my right lung, in my abdomen, and on my left quadricep. The left quadricep is a little nuanced, but mainly mesothelioma is attack of the mesothelial cells, which is a lining of certain organs. So it's in my right lung. It's not on my lung itself, but it's in the cavity of my right lung. So that's where the cancer is at, and it's in the peritoneal in my abdomen. So I suffer from those two bicavity mesothelioma. And like I said, I retired December 23, and I got diagnosed July of 24, with a prognosis of 18 months. And every effort I'm doing now is just trying to extend and to push that prognosis, to try to prove my oncology team that they were wrong with giving me 18 months. So mainly the symptoms I'm suffering from is breathing, taking a deep breath, and it's just kind of constricted in my lungs. And I was suffering from ascites accumulation, which is fluid accumulation in my abdomen, which I get drained every 7 to 10 days, called a paracentesis. But surprisingly, for the past 7 weeks now, I haven't been drained, which is awesome, which is a good sign. And my doctors asked me, what did I do, or what have I been doing differently? And I said, 7 weeks ago is when I started vigorously hitting the gym again, weightlifting and walking 3 miles a day. So they're like, well, it seems like something's working. So I attest to getting back to the gym and working out. And I'm coming up on my 8th week back to the gym. And I was really happy to be able to run a mile today. Again, a mile and a quarter actually today. Granted, it wasn't all together. It was broken up into little spurts because I couldn't breathe, right? It's the same sensation as if you're working out in a high elevation. That inability to
I was just
breathe.
going to ask you that. When we first moved to Wyoming and we were trying to exercise at that 6,000 feet, so it feels like that.
Yep, exactly like that. It's just that inability to catch your breath, or working, it's equivalent to working out in a high altitude location. Is what I can kind of attest it to. And then other than that, I just have medical procedures here and there and medical appointments. But yeah, my official diagnosis of stage 4 mesothelioma was July of last year. And since then, for the past 6 months, it's just a matter of tests and trying to find clinical trials for me to get into to postpone the inevitable, which I know is coming. And I accepted that. And it's just a matter of not thinking about it because I can't do anything about it at this point. So there's no need for me to dwell on that. But I like to share my story because I want to prevent somebody else from suffering or ending up going down the path I did. Because the symptoms that I experienced back in May that led to my diagnosis were the same symptoms that I presented to military doctors several years ago, that I couldn't breathe. I had a hard time breathing. I felt somebody was sitting on my chest, and me being so naive at the time, just believed everything that the military doctors would say. Oh, it's just stress. It's just anxiety. Let me give you this set of pills. Let me prescribe you this. It's work related because of your position. So you just need to relax and calm down and don't take on so much more stress. I believed them, right? There was nothing else that I can say or do and question their knowledge. They're the SMEs, but I believe them. But the reason why I bring that up is because I want people to not blindly follow what people tell them, that they need to be more proactive to prevent from being in a situation like I am today. So anytime and every time I talk with somebody, whether we reconnect from the past, I'm always saying, hey, please do me a favor, get yourself screened, get yourself checked out. If you're suffering from any ailments or sickness or illnesses, don't just blindly follow what the doctors say. Go get a second opinion or see an expert and make sure that they thoroughly vet that issue or concern. Because if I firmly believe if I pulled that thread, if I did more digging, if I didn't blindly follow and sought a second opinion, I probably could have caught my condition early on. That would not have led me to be in the terminal condition that I am today. But like I said earlier, I can't live in the past. I can't change anything in the past, and I just got to deal with the cards that I've dealt with today and move forward. and live the rest of the life that I can as much as I can. But that's the reason why I like to share my story. That's the reason why I like to talk to people, is hopefully to get somebody to think about their own condition and their own health and be proactive versus reactive to prevent the condition or whatever condition or diagnosis that they may potentially fall victim to.
You having 3 sons, can you walk us through having to break that news to your kids?
Yeah. Gets me every time.
How old are your boys? What are their ages right now?
So let's see, they're 19, 17, and 14. So I do recall that was probably, so I knew early on, once I had initial issues back in May, that I had something that was bad. And I kind of held it away from them because I didn't want them to worry. And I elected, talking with their mom, I elected that I was not gonna tell them until I had an official diagnosis. And Jen, as you remember, Jen, their mom, Jen was on board with that, and she was supportive of my decision. And of course, I kept her in the loop as the mother of my children. She supported the decision to hold notifying our kids until I was officially diagnosed. So the entire time until I was diagnosed, I knew something was wrong. I suspected it was cancer, but I didn't want to disclose it to them until I was officially diagnosed. So I was diagnosed, and that was probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. And as you know, as leaders of organizations, we're kind of prepared to hold those kinds of conversations with people, and how to deliver, negative news, bad news, or struggles an organization goes through. But this was really hard because it really hit home, and it was a personal thing. Not that there's no personal bad news that we would that deals with the organization, but this one was just a lot different. And Mike, that was probably one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. And it still gets me every time. But it was hard, and I told them exactly what my diagnosis was, and just the look on their face was just hard. It was hard, and it caught. I don't want to say it caught them by surprise, because they too knew that something was going on, because Dad had to go to medical appointments here and there. So they kind of suspected something was there, but they didn't realize that it was a terminal condition. Actually, to this day, I still suspect that they don't really have a full grasp of the severity of my condition. But I told them the news, and I told them the prognosis, and I told them what was gonna happen between then and now, or then and the end, and how it's gonna impact them and my ability to take care of them, because I needed to focus how it was going to impact them on a day-to-day basis. I told them I may not be able to pick you up, I may not be able to attend whatever band sporting event because I can't be out with the public. So I kind of relayed it to them and how it impacted them. But Jen and I decided to keep it simple as much as possible, and let them ask the questions whenever they are comfortable to ask the questions. The only thing I ask them is 2 things. One is, don't go searching on the internet what my condition is, because not everything on the internet is true. And then the second thing is, I told them, and I reassured them, that my condition is not contagious or hereditary. It's a function of the environment that I was exposed to, and that it's not something that they need to worry about at this point in their lives. So those were 2 of the main points that I kind of highlighted to them, so that they know it was isolated to me, so that they didn't feel any weirdness about my condition. But today, every time they come home, like, how are you? How is your how do you feel today? How was your appointment? They're kind of intrigued in that manner in regards to what my appointments entailed, what procedures happened. But other than that, they try to keep it like a day-to-day function, normal day-to-day, like school, and let's go play pool or something. But I still suspect that they don't understand the full gravity of the severity of my condition. And I think it will hit them once I start physically showing the gravity of my condition. Because right now I try to keep it lighthearted. I try to continue to joke with them. They see me going to the gym, so they kind of, my condition doesn't really show an impact to their day-to-day. But I think once that starts happening, I think that's going to start probably hitting them a little bit more.
How has your relationship been with the boys since revealing the diagnosis? I would imagine that you're much closer. How is that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been away from them for 2.5 years, and when I decided to come back home, I got slapped with this condition. They were happy for me to come back home. I think in a way our relationship is a little bit more, I wouldn't say strained, but different, because the whole reason why I retired is to hang out with them and to be with them more. But then now my condition kind of limits my ability to do the things that I anticipated doing with them. I can toss the ball, but I can't go run. I can't overexert myself physically or partake in any sporting exercise that they want to partake on, because physically I can't, because I can't breathe. So I think they recognize that I have some physical limitations. But other than that, I mean, it seems like they're not more sappy. They're not more close. They're never been like that to begin with. But I think they do recognize that I have some physical limitation because of my condition. My oldest, he's 19 now and going to college, self-sustaining. He's got a girlfriend, so his priorities are kind of more towards that. The younger ones are more closer to me because they come to my house, they stay at my house. So the two younger ones that are high school and middle school are more closer with me and are more in tune with my condition, while my oldest is more in tune with his love life, which is typical. And I don't hold it against him, because I remember being a 19-year-old myself. So I don't hold that against him, and any opportunity that he wants to come by and stop by at the house, he's more than welcome to. And at that point, he catches up and he asks me the questions that his younger brothers typically ask me on a day-to-day basis. But I think I wouldn't say our relationship is tighter. It's always been tight. But my kids are not as sappy as others would think they would be, or would think that they would be because of my conditions, because they were never like that to begin with.
I lost another friend a couple years ago to cancer, an Air Force guy as well. I don't think you ever met Jeff. Jeff and I grew up together, and he was an Air Force Academy football player and all this stuff, but he ended up getting testicular cancer, and then it moved into his lungs, and he fought a battle for a long time. And when he knew he was terminal, he asked me to start sharing stories over video to share with his boys, so when they were older and more understanding and a little more mature, he asked me to share some stories from his childhood to share with his kids. Are you doing anything like that? Are you writing anything down or documenting anything to be like, hey, eventually you're going to be this age and you're going to want to get married, or you're going to want to get a job, or you're going to want to do this stuff. Are you doing anything like that for the kids?
I thought about that, and what kind of deterred me from doing that is, and this is my own mindset, right? Is if I started doing that, I've accepted the fact that I've established my end mark. At this point today, I don't want to think that way. I think I still have me personally, I feel like I still have a big fight to be able to push this prognosis further. So I don't feel I need to do that at this point, because I can still provide the guidance and the mentoring that I can with my kids today. I think once I know and I start feeling that my prognosis is getting worse, I think I'm going to start doing that, because I know my time at that point is going to be very limited, that I may not get to a certain time in their life that I may want to record some words of wisdoms or lessons learned that I encountered in my upbringing to share with them. But I did really think about that, because my son, for Father's Day, he gave me a book, and I'm assuming you probably saw this, but it's a book essentially to jot down, it has questions, what was your favorite color, or when did you graduate? It just talks about, asks all those questions for me to write it down so that he can read it at some point in the future. When he gave me that for Father's Day last year, that's what got me thinking, would I want to start recording myself? But then again, like I said, I didn't want to do that, because at that point I'm kind of limiting or establishing in my mind that my time is coming up soon, which I didn't want to start doing that.
Yeah.
So
my apologies if my questions come across as insensitive.
No.
I'm sorry. I was just curious if these are the types of things that were comments. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. No, not like I said, don't apologize. But it's a good thing to talk about. I'm sure it's this podcast. It's a good thing to keep about. My personal philosophy is I didn't want to put my mindset that the end is near. To me, the end is not near yet. It's still have a big fight. But like I said, once I know that the end is near, then I know I can step back and say, start to myself. This is what I'm doing. Just don't apologize.
I always tease my kids because I always think I'm the king. I can tell you one day you're documenting all this stuff. Even though it has nothing to do with, me passing away, or it's just, I know deep down eventually they'll appreciate documenting their lives and sharing some wisdom.
If you mind me asking, how old are the boys now?
So, 13-year-old I already know what's coming.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, dad's an idiot, and they know everything.
They start calling you bro.
Yeah.
Talk to me that way. I'm not your friend.
Yeah. Exactly. And once again, I don't mean to come across insensitive, but when you called me in that May-June time frame, and you were sharing your diagnosis, it caused a lot of self-reflection with me as well. And I did everything you told me to do. I went and got checked. I got a chest x-ray. I got my blood work. So thank you so much for that advice. At the same time, for that 48 to 72 hours while I was waiting to hear about, the blood work and some of the things coming back, I told Heather, I said, look, if this stuff comes back and it says that I have something similar to Mike or I have something else, I said, I personally still wouldn't change anything. I would have never met my wife. I would have never had my kids if we weren't in Cheyenne, Wyoming, right? I would have never done all the crazy, stupid stuff that we did if I hadn't chosen this path. And I don't mean that to be insensitive. I just, if somebody told me tomorrow that I'm terminal, I know that I did the job, the career that was meant for me.
Yeah.
And I hope that no matter what, you feel and realize how much of a difference you've made. You've been such an impact in my life. I mean, my goodness, your picture is upstairs from pilot training graduation. Here is one of my buddies from missile training that has nothing to do with this world that I'm in now, and shows up. We're just part of a
Yeah.
we're just part of a group that is, it's just we're serving something greater than ourselves. And
Yeah.
I just, I'm so thankful of the decisions that I've made with my life and being part of your life. And so I'm sure there's tons of things that you second guess all the time, but I hope that you realize how much of an impact you were in my life, even though
Well,
I was on the side of the road throwing up because you gave me all those drinks.
dude, I still have that picture too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
payback. Remember that? It was payback because you got me
I
there.
haven't seen Vince forever either. He is such a evil person.
Who?
Vince Montano.
Oh, Vince. Yeah. Yeah, he's been texting me quite often, and it was like, you know, with my diagnosis, it was a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to reconnect with people who we've drifted away from each other, and it's to no fault to anyone, you know, because it's just life, and it's just our military career, right? You know, we establish relationships and then we're yanked from each other, and then when we're given opportunities to reconnect, it's like we never left, right? But my diagnosis allowed me, and when I went public with it, it allowed me to reconnect with a lot of people, and when reconnecting with people helped me a lot, helped me process what was going on with me, helped me with my mental health, because it allowed me to focus on something else versus what was happening with me. You know, yeah, when I was reconnecting with people, yeah, they, you know, we talked a little bit about me and my prognosis, but we quickly transitioned to, hey, how have you been? What's going on in your life? What have you been up to? And the preponderance of the conversation was more focused on that versus what was going on with me. And what that did to me, it was, I don't even think the person even recognized it, but it did me so good in regards to my mental health, right? Because it allowed me to focus on something else other than the issues that I was going with, because I really suffered. My mental health really did suffer when I got diagnosed, and anxiety really got the best of me, where I was really medicated for that stuff. But reconnecting with people and just talking and catching up with people really helped me a lot. And I'm so thankful that there were so many people that reached out, and I got to talk to people, you know, and the prayers that people were doing, I like to say the prayers are working because things are happening, which I can't explain and the doctors can't explain. Something is happening, and something's working. And like I said, I know I'm kind of a scatterbrain, and I probably attested to chemo, but yeah, what I was trying to get at is reconnecting with people definitely helped me. The people helped me more than they realized when they would call, and I was able to share my story with them and catch up with them. But yeah, talking with you and doing this, it helps me more than you really think, for sure.
Well, I've been looking forward to it, and unfortunately, I know that you're very busy with family and other engagements, and I don't ever want to get in the way of that. Because you said you're getting ready to go to California to see your family. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm at a point with my treatment plan that I can, in between my infusions, I can go and see my parents, because my parents are aged. They're in their mid to upper 80s now, and talking to them one night just opened my eyes in their condition, because I've been so focused in my condition. It opened my eyes on their physical health, and it just said, I need to go see them sooner rather than later. So yeah, I'm headed up to California here, not this weekend, but the following weekend, just to spend a weekend with them. So I'm
what's their proximity? What's their proximity to the wildfires?
They are just south of the Altadena fire, southeast, I should say. My brother is impacted by the Altadena fire. They were evacuated when the evacuation notice came out, but now they're back in their house, and I think they're going to try to ride out the next round of Santa Ana winds this week. But for the most part, other than my brother, the rest of my family who are in Southern California are not as impacted. My parents are live in the fire zone. I know that for a fact because their fire insurance got terminated a year ago because of the zone that they lived in. So we definitely rushed to get them coverage because we do recognize that they live in a fire zone. And I actually spoke to my mom, was it this morning, or either this morning or yesterday, and I asked her what the conditions are. She said as of right now it's pretty good, but it's always in the back of their mind of what's going to happen once the winds kick in. But yeah, what's happening in California is crazy. I'm sure flying in I'll probably see the issues there.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your own personal health. If the air has a lot of particulates in it, I didn't know if somebody who's sensitive.
No, that's a good point. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that. But I do plan on wearing a mask when I'm flying, which is something that I should probably do. I didn't do it last time, but I will do it this time for sure, especially flying in California with the particulate matters. You're right. That's a good point. And to be honest with you, I didn't even think about that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, just that's all. I mean, my time in Djibouti, when I was deployed to Djibouti for 5 months, they changed out the air conditioning unit in our tent, and the very next day, the air conditioning unit was black.
Oh,
And I thought, wow, we're breathing in a lot of really bad stuff here. And it's because
yeah.
the Djiboutians burn tires, television
Yep.
sets, they burn everything. So I was just thinking with how susceptible you are to air quality, I was just thinking about that. But of course, I mean, your family, with all the insurance companies, I mean, it's just unaffordable. I mean,
Yeah.
my goodness, this is going to be such an unbelievably expensive
Yep.
recovery project. It's so sad. My niece, you probably don't remember, she was there for our missile graduation. She lives it's called like Edgewood. She lives just about
Mhm.
20 minutes north of Santa Monica. She's still out of her house. I don't know if it's still standing, but she's in a
That's
very
crazy.
susceptible area. Lost a lot of homes near her as well. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's a bad situation out there, but yeah, and hopefully people will bounce back, and hopefully they won't be put through the ringer with all these insurance issues going on right now.
Yeah. And I'm just tired of all the rhetoric of blaming people about why these fires happen. And it's just like, guys, can we just focus on actually helping people that are in need rather than trying to blame one party or another? It's
Yeah,
just,
politicizing the
there's no
situation is
help.
definitely not
Yeah.
good.
There's no help to it. So
Yeah.
you mentioned your parents getting up there in age. Are they going to stay in California? I guess the majority of your family is in Southern California, so everybody's there for the long haul.
They are, and unfortunately, that's what they used to. That's what they know, and that's the only thing that they are familiar with. How many attempts I've talked to them about getting out of California, but they're that's all they know, right? The cost of living there is so high, but that's all they know. Spending
Mhm.
spending so much money for a gallon of milk, to them that's normal, right? As much as I try to portray to them that the cost of living is so much cheaper elsewhere, again, it's subjective, and that's all they know. But my sister is moving out of California and going to Texas, where my older brother lives. So, but she's always had the pulse on the economics of California and the politics of California, how crazy it's getting. So she's definitely the one that's leaving there. But the rest of my other families, I got 3 other siblings that are there, and my parents. That's all they know, and they've accepted it, and they are going to live for the long haul in California, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hey,
I wanted. Yeah. Go ahead.
quick question for you. So you said you were deployed to Djibouti for
Mhm.
5 months. Do you know if Djibouti is one of the locations for the PACT Act?
Yes, I signed all that paperwork, and when I left to the deployment, part of the out processing was a list of all of the chemicals you were
Okay.
exposed to, and it
Good.
wasn't so much because of the base. I mean, the base had water treatment facilities. The base itself was fine, but where we were located, the Djiboutian dump, if you will, and how they got rid of things, all that wind would just blow right onto our facility. And I think about all the contractors that have worked there for years because they pay a really good salary. So let's say, for example, a driver, somebody that's driving you to and from the tents to the airplanes. They're getting a couple $100,000. I mean, and so it's where else can you be essentially a bus driver and make $200,000? But
Right.
at the same time, if you're there for 3 or 4 years and you're breathing all this stuff in, I'm concerned about those contractors that are there for
Right.
those long periods of time.
Oh yeah, no kidding. But in regards to yourself though, that's all in your records. So that's
It
all in
is.
your, so at some point in the future, God forbidding, if something was to happen related to any exposure, it's in your records, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
it is. It
Good.
is in my records. Um, I wanted to ask a couple things about the nuclear world.
Yeah.
Having served in such a critical role, it's kind of the silent watch. Nobody really knows that it's out there. I was showing folks some missile holes and missile silos and all that stuff on Google Maps. I was like, no, this stuff is out there. How did you, as a father with kids and all the things that they taught us and the things that we learned behind closed doors, that's an immense responsibility. So how did you balance that? Can you just flip a switch, or do you bring that home with you? Because my job, I bring it home with me quite a bit. I'm just curious what it was like to be part of that nuclear deterrence.
Sure. Well, as you know, being in that world for early on in your career, a lot of the stuff was very classified, right? And as you know, it's not glamorous, it's not highly advertised, it's not highly talked about. So I was able to compartmentalize what I did on a day-to-day basis, and not even talk about my job when I came home.
Mm.
Yeah, the family knew I came home from alert because of the stink that I would bring back from the capsule funk, as you recall what that was. But in regards to my actual job, what I did down there, that it wasn't really talked about because I was able to just shut it down and not even brought it home. And that's partly a function of my personal philosophy, is because I never wanted to bring work home to begin with. One, because I didn't want to burden or bring the stressors of work to the home environment. I didn't want to mix the two worlds together. Was Jen at that time ever intrigued at what I did? I was able to impart what we did to her at a very, very high level. As you know, maybe Heather back in the day was also knew what you did and probably kept it to a very high level. But for the most part, I was able to separate that, just so that I can not disclose any of the classified information. Um, did I struggle from doing that? I don't think so. I think it's just from my personal mindset of not bringing work home. I enjoyed living off base, right? Because I was able to kind of physically shut military operations out when I would leave the gates. Seeing it in my rearview mirror, I'm leaving base, changed my mindset. I remember one time when I was working at 20th at FE, and I lived in Fort Collins, and people were like, "Why the hell would you live in Fort Collins?" I was like, "Well, you know what? It kind of helped me because it helped me prepare in the morning for my drive back to Cheyenne from Fort Collins to kind of prepare myself for the day. And on the back end, it kind of helped me decompress so that I am not thinking or bringing my work back home, right?" So personally, I think I did a good job of kind of, like I said, compartmentalizing work and not mixing the two environments together. Now, is that the right thing? I don't know.
Mm.
Would my kids and Jen at the time would have wanted more knowledge as far as what I was doing? I don't know, and I didn't get that hint from them. Maybe they did give me a hint. I don't know.
Mm.
But just given the classified nature of my job back in the missile world, I never even discussed missiles. Even when I came back for a second tour back in 2015 to 2017, I didn't really talk about work. As far as missile work, at that time, I was more in the supervisory position. Yeah, of course, that stuff was kind of talked about. Oh yeah, Airman so and so did this, or Lieutenant so and so did this, and we had to deal with that and spend hours doing that. But in regards to actually pulling alerts, that was definitely something that was not talked about, because I think they did understand that it was a classified mission. So there were no questions that my boys nor Jen at the time posed towards me. Um, but if I may, talking about the nuclear mission, like I said, not a lot of people know much about it, and as you know, it's not glamorous. It's more like Groundhog Day every single day, and the issues that we were faced with from a leadership perspective was, empowering those young operators and maintainers and making them understand their piece of the pie in the big scheme of things, so that they have a kind of appreciation of what they do. I recognized that when I was back there the second time, back in 2015 and 17, because I was more in the chief and the DO position. So I was able to recognize that there was a lack of understanding of the importance of what they do. So that was a struggle from a leadership perspective. How do you make your operators, your maintainers appreciate what they do when it's not glamorous, it's not fancy, it's not talked about a lot. It was a constant struggle for us, and how we went about doing that was kind of giving them the backstory of what they do, and where their role is and why their role is important. Because at this point in my career, I've already had a combatant command time at US Stratcom, so I understand the reason or why it's important to have whatever missile is on alert, or whatever targeting package is put out on those missiles. So I was able to convey to them, like, hey, this is why you do this targeting. This is why, how often you do this targeting. This is the reason why, is because it's a shuffle game of the targets that we held in different priorities. Here's a reason why that it's important for you to go chase that missile and put it back on alert, because it's on a certain priority, right? So giving them that story behind the mission kind of helps them understand the importance of their job. The second piece of the struggle was the empowerment. As you know, and as you probably recall, there was a lot of micromanagement in that job, right? There was ridiculous TTPs, ridiculous checklist steps that people were doing. But back in 2015, as a result of the scandal that happened in our community, finally the community recognized that leadership is imposing all these restrictions onto the operations from behind a desk. Why don't you go out there and actually do the mission and see the impacts of your restrictions?
Oh, yeah, like the driving 65 and a 75 and all that nonsense.
Yeah, all that nonsense, all that ridiculousness, all those stupid phone calls that people would have to do for approval. When the leadership was starting to go out there, it's amazing how things were starting to change, right? Oh, why are you doing this? I recall one of them when I went on alert. It's like, why the hell am I having to call so-and-so to do this? That's my decision out here in the field. No, we're not going to do that. Let's take that out of the checklist. So it was just stupid, queepish stuff like that kind of made the operators and the maintainers not feel empowered to do their job. So it was our job to make sure we got rid of all those ridiculousness nuances to the mission, so that people actually feel like they can make the decision out there. That was back in 15 and 17. I don't know how it is today. I haven't been back to the field since 17. But I know empowerment and appreciation for the job was a struggle from a leadership aspect, to let people feel that they are empowered to do their job and that they have a better understanding and appreciation of the mission. And the empowerment piece, again, just to close the loop on that, is just, remove the nuances and the ridiculousness, so that the young lieutenant who we've charged to be responsible for those nuclear assets can make the decisions. If we can give them the key to launch those missiles, why can't we give them the decision to make the right decision? Right?
That's where I was going to ask you if the culture is improved, because I still to this day have nightmares from my time in the missile community, not because of the mission, but because of the culture. I mean, I have nightmares about the time I had to stand up there in front of the group commander because I failed a check ride. I
Yeah.
have nightmares about studying for that stupid test we always used to have to take. And so I share a lot of stories with guys and gals in the C-17 community and some of the other communities I've been with. I'm like, you think this sucks? Let me tell you some missile stories. You drive out, 3.5 hours to this place. You don't get per diem. You don't get any money. You have to bring your own food. You have to do your. So, people are complaining about, well, I don't want to fly there because per diem's only $40 a day and I'd rather fly here. I'm like, oh my gosh, let me slap you when we land because we suffered like you could possibly not imagine
Well,
in the missile community. But at the same time, it developed a friendship of all of us that is unbreakable because
yeah,
we
because
embrace
we
the
all
suck
suffered
together.
together.
Yeah, we all suffer together. But my God, I remember I'd had multiple hundreds in a row or something, and I forget the DO's name. And he's like, nobody can get that many hundreds in a row. I think you're cheating. I'm going to sit next to you during the test. So he sat next to me during the test. I got 100 on the test. He's like, okay, you're good. I sat next to you. I'm like, this is the level of trust we have. You're going to come take a test with me, sit next to me, and if I don't get 100, well, then that's because I've been cheating all this time. Or if I do get 100, then you trust me. So thank goodness you guys are empowering your young folks to be out there and make responsible decisions. Because oh
Well, unfortunately, that's the function of the toxic leadership, right?
yeah,
That we lived, that we grew up under, right? And you can call me, ass backwards, but that type of leadership kind of mentored me on how not to be growing up.
exactly.
There's the infamous, you know, former leader that we know called Crazy Jack. He bleep
Oh
that
yeah,
if you want to, but I don't care. Yeah, he was like the epitome of how not to be for me, right? And there's unfortunately there were so many of those types of leaders in that career in my career field that I held in regard to not to be that type of leader. And unfortunately, it's just those are the types of leaders that my community continued to progress. And it was just I was just very dumbfounded how that type of mentality is rewarded at the expense of the people, right? Makes you feel like you cheated because you had 100%. That's bullshit.
yep.
Unfortunately, I can't speak to how the community is today. I mean, I know, as you recall, the scandal caused a lot of changes, which caused the pendulum to go to one side. I don't know where they're at in that piece. I've heard of rumors, but I don't want to spread rumors or talk about rumors
Mm,
because rumors are rumors. But I can only hope that the current leaders out there are taking care of the people, because, as you know, taking care of the people will result in the mission being taken care of. And unfortunately, I hear that there's some struggles out there, but yeah, but it only made us better leaders today, right?
I was gonna say good for you because I am the same mindset of I saw what bad leadership was, and so I knew that's not the way I want to treat people. And so I looked at it as lessons learned. Unfortunately, I had to experience them, but yeah, I mean that's the way I went with it. And the leader that you mentioned earlier, when I gave my last alert speech and saying thank you so much, I'm going to pilot training. I've been, dreaming about this since day one of joining the Air Force. And I didn't say anything negative about the missile community. I said nothing but kind things. And that person stood up and he's like, what a great speech. Go forth and conquer, Mike. I'm so proud of you. And then a week later, when I'm doing my out processing to leave FE Warren and go off to pilot training, you have to have your out brief. And I go into his office for the out brief, and he's like, "So, I see that you're getting out early, and you're gonna Palace Chase. What are you gonna do next?" I was like, "Are you kidding me? I just gave a speech a week and a half ago that you were commending in front of 100 people getting ready to go out on alert, And that just shows you how disingenuous everything
Yeah.
you said. You have
Yeah.
no idea where I'm going next. And I just gave a speech about it a week and a half ago.
That's crazy. But then I'm not surprised coming from that individual either. Hey, so I don't think I've ever told you this, but you transitioning from missiles to pilot C-17. Oh, or no, you were
I went
RPA
straight
pilot.
to C-17s, yeah, and then I did RPAs for 5 years.
Yep.
So I did C-17s for 5 years, RPAs for 5 years, then came here in the Capitol Hill area for a few years, and then back to the C-17 for 5 years.
Yeah, but you transitioning out of missiles was always in the back of my mind, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but being a DO back when I was at 17 or 15 to 17 and in command, when people would express their desire of doing something else other than missiles, I can sense the fear when they would come talk to me. I was like, don't be fearful of that, because missiles is not for everybody, and if you want to do something else, by all means, let me support you and let me help you get to that, because all I can envision was you and how successful you were in that other world, right? Missiles may not have been for you, but then again, missiles wasn't your desire. You wanted to be a pilot, right? And fortunately, the stars lined up for that to happen back in the day in the toxic environment for you to do that. But every time somebody came up to me and expressed their desire to come out, I always just thought about not to transition over to a different career field. I always thought about you and your transition. I'm like, man, you were successful with your transition, so let me help this individual be successful in the other career field. But I recall the anxiety these people would go through because they didn't want to reveal their cards is what they would say. I was like, don't be fearful. I'm here. Let me help you. Let me help you get to what you want to do. I appreciate you wearing the uniform. It may not be in my career field, but let me help you get to where you want to be so that you can enjoy life and that you can be a productive individual in our military, right? Because the last thing I'd want you to do is to be miserable being in doing the job that you did not want to do. Granted, some people like myself probably accepted that and just tried to make the best out of something. But if missiles is not for you, let me help you get to wherever it is. With the caveat that
yeah.
With the caveat that the grass may not be greener on the other side, but again, I want you to figure that out, right? So let me help you get there. But yeah, you were always in the back of my mind every time somebody expressed their desire to do something else. Like, let me help you get there.
I've had multiple people come into my office. Sir, it's not you. I want to go do something different. And I tell them the same thing you just said. Hey, as long as you're still serving, I will help you cross-train into anything you want to do. The C-17 mission, it's hard. There's a lot of 24-hour days where you're not sleeping. And so people think of it as I'm flying this sexy, cool airplane. I go to all these cool places. I'm like, yeah, but sleep deprivation is a real thing, and it's not for everybody. And so I've helped people move on to different career fields because of how difficult the mission can be.
Yeah, and you haven't gone through the
like
process.
you said, the grass isn't greener. I'm sorry?
But you haven't gone through that process. You can speak to that, having gone through the entire process of doing it. So that's great. That's great for sure.
Yeah, I was when I was flying the RPA mission, it was on night shift. There would be people that were just miserable. I mean, drinking coffee, staying awake and all. And I did really feel bad for them, but they kept complaining. Well, man, once I get out of this RPA mission, I'm going to be flying this airplane or that airplane. It's going to be so great. And so what I would do is, as the operations supervisor, I'd be like, all right, guys, it's 4:00 in the morning. How do you feel right now? Oh man, I'm so tired. I said, this isn't even touching what it's like to be on a 24-hour mission where you don't sleep. This is nothing. So when you think that your next airplane you're going to is just going to be amazing and you're going to look back at this and think this was a horrible mission and experience, I'm like, please call me, please text me, please email me and let me know. Let me tell you how many guys have emailed me, text me, called me. You're right. It is hard. Everywhere you go, it's hard. So don't think just because you're leaving the missile community that you're going to go to something great. It's it's all work, and it's all rewarding, and you just got to find your place. And good for you for sharing where the nuclear community fits into the bigger piece of the puzzle. I share a story all the time about how there's 50 steps to the kinetic chain. So everybody thinks the fighter pilot's the cool guy and he gets to shoot the missile and do all these crazy things. Well, there's actually 50 steps in the logistical chain to make that kinetic strike actually happen. And so we really talk about the folks, the intel officers, the maintenance officers, the logistics officers. I mean, I say officers, but you know what I mean? Everybody within that chain. It takes everybody. So
Right.
I've had pilots in my office, and I'm like, look, man, you are not special. You were fortunate enough for God to give you the ability to pass a flight class 1 physical. A lot of people are colorblind. A lot of people have certain things that prevent them from going to pilot training. So you are blessed with things that do not make you any better. I can teach anybody how to fly an airplane. An airplane is just like driving a car. There's a few more switches, there's a few more steps, but it's just like driving a car. We can teach anybody how to do that. So think about that next time when somebody's out there helping you refuel your airplane, or somebody's helping you offload or onload bags or something. That person is no less important to this mission. So do not treat anybody with disrespect just because they're not a pilot. Oh my, it drives me crazy.
That's funny you say that, because as you know, I was a schoolhouse commander, and I had a lot of time with the young operators and the young maintainers. And one of the things that I constantly imparted to them is, outside of their job, right? It doesn't matter what my rank is, as long as you treat somebody with dignity and respect, you'll get dignity and respect back. You treat others how you want to be treated. If just because I'm a boss, at the time I was a lieutenant colonel, that doesn't mean I'm higher than anyone else. Yeah, I am on the rank, but I'm still a person, and it does not give me the right to treat you disrespectfully, right? And it's just mind-blowing to me how somebody can think that one is, lack for a better words, almighty, that they're more important than other people, when you just, like you said, there's numerous people that contribute to that one mission. And if you take one out, it's like a Jenga piece, the entire thing can fall apart and it won't be successful. And that's one of the things that we kind of imparted to the young maintainers and operators, is that you have a piece in this, in providing peace globally. We always throw out the nuclear deterrent mission. And that's the buzzword. But do you really know what that means and how that is actually executed? We give them that second and third order background information, as opposed to just say, nuclear deterrence. You allow other people to operate in the AORs because of your ability to launch missiles in minutes time. That's stupid. That blanket statement is so dated, and it just tells people that they're not really important at all. And again, I'm sorry to take your point there, but when you said that, just treating people with dignity and respect was really huge in my book. And when it got to the point of somebody treating somebody with disrespect, and that's where you call the knock it off piece and say, hey, listen, buddy, what's going on? Is there something wrong that's causing you to talk to somebody in that manner? What's going on, right? And then at that point, you just dig into that individual why and try to help them out so that they cannot be in that manner. But that was just one of the philosophies that I held myself to. I'm sure you did the same thing.
Yeah, that's why I love this job so much, because it gives me a chance to mentor and shape our future generations that are going to replace us. And so every time I have an opportunity, Heather's always like, oh, here he goes again on his recruiting speech. Like, no. I said, this changed my life. This provided direction in my life, because I was just a massive troublemaker and I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was a pain in the ass. And especially in the missile community, I was a pain in the ass. I was unhappy. I was, you name it. And so, yeah, if I hadn't gotten out and done something different, in the flying community, it would have been, I would have punched. Yeah.
And you can tell there, if you didn't do missiles, you guys wouldn't have met.
Yeah, if we wouldn't have met, it wouldn't have allowed me to know what embracing the suck really means.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it takes a special level of grit to make it through there. And
and it gave you a good perspective too, and it sounds like you were able to take advantage of that perspective moving on into your other career field, to be able to tell your people like, hey, don't be a whiny little you know what, because here other people have it worse in other locations.
Absolutely. And so I truly feel that everything happens for a reason, and that was the precursor, that was the test to see if I could make it in that next career field. Because let me tell you, if I was a brand new second lieutenant and I showed up at pilot training, I absolutely would not have made it. Completely would not have made it. I needed that kick in the nuts, that old patch.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Morale will improve.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Morale
the guy's
sucks.
Getting kicked in the junk. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Totally. So true. And so many just amazing memories and friendships from that time. Skiing and mountain biking and just enjoying Wyoming. Wyoming's an amazing place if you have a job that you like.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I saw that a lot too at the schoolhouse, and when people were like, oh man, I'm going to Montana, it's going to be so cool. I was like, listen, dude, don't have that mindset, right? Don't think of don't let your mind automatically go to the negative. You know, it's going to be negative if you have that mindset. Have a positive attitude. Look at the positive things that location has for you. You know, I pulled my second crew was at Montana, and before I was sent to Montana, I told myself I wasn't going to go get sent north of F.E. Warren, and fortunately the Air Force decided to send me to Montana because of the scandal. And I was so thankful that it did that, because to this day my kids still talk about Montana, on how beautiful that state is. It truly is God's country. They talk about, at the time we lived on base, they still talk about the neighborhood and the kids playing in the street. And I still remember my neighbors who I've talked to, I ran to a couple of times a couple of months ago, and like, oh yeah, you guys, you're the Yamzon kids are out in the street all the time. it was a beautiful place to be in. And it's just that mindset. Don't let your mind get to the negative. Think about the goodness of what's going to happen. You know, because if you start thinking negative, you're going to be miserable the entire time. You know, get out there, enjoy what the state can offer you, and enjoy what outdoor recreation can provide for you. You know, it's more on you to change that mindset, to take advantage of what the amenities are in front of you. And if you take advantage of it, you'll have a different mental attitude, which will impact your ability to do the job, which will make the mission better. What? Mind blown.
Go figure.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time I would drive home from Cheyenne, Wyoming, back to the Seattle area, I would go the Montana route, and it's so beautiful.
Yep.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
For sure. Yeah.
So you guys, out of the 3 locations, that one has a lot of spectacular beauty.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the biggest missile field too, so it's a 3-hour drive.
To all of them.
To the majority, to a big number of them, but it's still again. I told myself, once the kids are old enough, and hopefully I'll make it to this point, but once the kids are out in college, I'm going to move out of Nebraska, because there's nothing for me here, and move to Montana, because I'm so fortunate that the Air Force brought me there, because I fell in love with that state. My family who visited me there a couple of times loved the state. We were actually thinking of going back there this spring to go to Glacier National Park. So it's a beautiful outdoors location that people just don't recognize once they get, picked to go to Malmstrom Air Force Base. They automatically think negative, when there's so many good things about the state.
So as a California kid, I want to kind of leave you with this. What would you say, Cal Poly Pomona, right?
Right.
What would you say to that freshman ROTC cadet, that Mike Yamzon, or what would you say to them now about service?
Yeah. So when I got commissioned and I was a young lieutenant, I was an under the radar kind of guy. I wanted to stay below the radar, out of the limelight and out of people's views. And I think if I was to talk to that young lieutenant again, I would say, challenge yourself, right? Put yourself out there, because if you don't challenge yourself and you don't do new things, you'll never learn. I didn't start developing until probably when I was a senior captain, young major, when Crazy Jack sent me to Montana because of the scandal, right? And I was really tested in my ability to try to investigate and try to get to the bottom of things as far as what was going on in our community. It didn't test me as much as that did. So if I was to talk to my young self again, I would say, put yourself out there, learn from, you're still young, that you can commit those mistakes, right? And learn from those mistakes, because a mistake, everyone's entitled to a mistake. The problem is, if the mistake is repeated again, it's no longer a mistake, it's now a problem. So I was always afraid to make mistakes. So that's why I always stayed under the radar. I would tell myself to challenge myself and go ahead and make those mistakes, as long as you learn from them, and mainly challenge myself, because I never did. I sure did. I went with the flow. I didn't go against the grain, but today I'm okay with it going against the grain. Call the baby ugly when it's ugly. Yeah. I didn't ruffle feathers. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. Probably is because of the toxic environment that we were living in. I don't know. Maybe thinking back now, probably that was in the back of my head. I didn't want to have to be facing the wrath of toxic leadership. But maybe if I was to do it again, I probably should have, to expose that toxic leadership, right? Somebody needs to step up against the bully, to expose the bully, so that things can change. That's what I would say to the young lieutenant again, is up your game, challenge yourself, make the mistakes, and it's okay to go against the grain, for sure.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does. It absolutely does. And I tell the same thing to my boys. Right now they're picking classes for the following year. And I keep telling them, why don't you take that class? Oh, that class is too hard. How do you even know? How do you know? You could end up loving that class, and it could change your life, and you become somebody that's really into science, or somebody that's really into math. Just because you think something's hard because some other kid told you it was hard, what does that mean? You don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're dealing with your kiddos, but yeah.
I mean, I always tell the story. In command, I had like 3 flight commander positions that opened up because people were PCSing, and for transparency purposes, I want people to apply and do the vetting process, interview and talk to the people to see and pick who would be the best candidate to fill those positions. And I remember one of the candidates, he was specifically applying for a specific flight commander position. And I asked him, I was like, why this position versus the other position? And his answer is because I know this position more than the other. Guess what position he got sent to? So I chose him for the other position that he wasn't familiar with. And the reason why I told him when I hired him for that position, I was like, first off, I know that I recognize this is a position that you are not comfortable with and that you are not applying for. But I'm going to hire you for this position, and are you going to accept it? And here's the reason why I want to hire you, is because I want you to learn more about yourself. You'll learn the mission, but I want you to learn more about yourself, that you can do it, and that you can challenge yourself to be a better leader and to be a better person by putting you in that position. And he excelled, and he understood, and he accepted the position. And that's one of the things that back when I was in command, I was just hoping I had that mindset when I was young and a young officer, that I had that mindset and that somebody was there to challenge me. Oh. Yeah, right. But yeah,
the boss needed my phone.
The what? The boss did?
The boss. She needed my phone.
Tell her I said hi.
Mike says hi.
Oh, that must be a cue that it's time for you to cut this.
I guess. Well, brother, man, it is so good to catch up with you.
Same here, man.
When are
Same
we
here.
gonna do it again? Because I didn't even get to the list of the things I wanted to ask you.
Well, once you review this podcast and figure out that everything I said was trash, we can do it again better. You can better
No, it's
script
good.
me.
It's good. I think we've come to the agreement that embracing the suck and just doing things to take care of one another, it makes the world of difference.
Yeah, and taking care of the people definitely will take care of the mission for sure.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right, dude.
it was good to see you, Mike.
Whenever you do have a chance to see Jen, tell her I said hello. And I don't believe I've ever met your parents, so I don't think I
No,
have.
I don't think you
So
have.
I met one of your brothers, and your sister was like a nurse, in the Air Force, wasn't she? Like a
My
or
sister-in-law.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I've met
Yeah.
a couple of them, but I don't think I met your parents.
Yeah, well, hopefully, like I said, man, congratulations to your graduation, to your
Yeah,
retirement.
hey, it is a graduation. I've graduated from the military. Now I need to grow up and get a real job.
Oh, geez, what you're doing here, man, is gonna work wonders. Tell Heather and the kids I said hello, and tell them I said thank you for their dedication to you and your 24-year career.
Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you later. Love you, man.
All right, man. Love you too, dude.
See you, Mikey.
See you. Bye.